Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Trey Bostick, the Senior Director for the Federal Agency Specialist Program at TD SYNNEX Public Sector. Trey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Of course, of course. A lot to talk about here. AI adoption has surged across the federal government over the past year in 2024. At the end of 2024, the White House released a consolidated list of AI use cases. It showed that AI implementation had more than doubled in comparison to the previous year. We have research and surveys that show that the majority of federal agencies are using AI in some capacity. That, however, introduces a lot of risks and challenges, particularly around compliance and security. So let's start there. Could you talk about what you're seeing with federal agencies, what they're struggling with most, particularly when managing and securing data pipelines?
Sure, happy to do that. So, and great question, and you're absolutely right. When we look in the federal space today, and frankly across public sector and generally really sort of across the globe as a whole, there is a tremendous amount of risk that comes with AI and AI adoption. And I think to your point, we're seeing all the departments and all the agencies are using it. But when you talk about risk, certainly one of the risks is security related, invasion, if you will, from outside, bad actors, et cetera. Getting into government agencies and places they want to and using that as a conduit, as they always do. One of the other things that's really critical is really the proper use of AI, right? I mean, we all hear about governance and provenance and how important that is in the space, and it absolutely is. As sort of big picture as we talk through this, and we'll get a little more granular, I'm sure, as we move through the conversation today, but really big picture, it's the bad actors and the bad guys out there, if you will, right? They don't have any rules. The good actors have rules that we're trying to follow, and we're also trying to be responsible and moral and character driven around how the tools get used in the space, whether it's the government themselves using it or industry as a whole. And again, I think we see those same challenges as we branch out into the larger global picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about actionable things here. As agencies are working to make sure AI-driven data management aligns with security and compliance mandates, and especially in supply chain security. So could you talk about some of the steps that federal agencies can take to address those particular challenges?
Sure. I mean, again, I think, security, and it's so interesting when, we talk about cybersecurity in general, and cybersecurity touches everything we do in our world today. I mean, that's a fact. But as we look at secure supply chain, organizations that do business with and are engaged with the government, not only the federal government agencies in general, right? Secure supply chain is so critical. Having proper SCRM plans, supply chain risk management plans in place, and also the controls and other things to be compliant to some of the regulations that the government's up against, right? I mean, we're all hearing about CMMC2 and level 1s and 2s, and then we're expecting that I think that to be put in play going into the summer of this year. I mean, 2025 is here, and that's the requirement around CMC2. NIST requirements, and you certainly have FedRAMP requirements that all tie back into that, along with several other things. I mean, you've got executive orders that are in place, the OMB AI sort of directive that going along there as well. So there's a lot of regulation going on as far as that goes, and the government again really is doing the right things. They're on the right path. It's just the pace and the acceleration of the pace maybe is really the critical item, or how they get there quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last few years, of course, have shown us how fragile global supply chain can be, and AI has the potential to enhance that. So how are you seeing the agencies leveraging AI, but also how can they leverage AI?
No, so they absolutely are, and I think again you'll continue to see them do that. And one of the ways, just a pretty straightforward example of one of the ways they're using it is the management of the supply chain, right? Is making sure, as an example, that you don't have fictitious manufacturer items coming in. I mean, again, people are very sophisticated on the bad actor side, and so they can make things look very real, coming in the door. So AI is a good way to stay on top of that. Also, from the perspective of, infrastructure support, et cetera, AI really has the ability to help the government agencies and departments keep an eye on the flow of things. There's such a tremendous amount of data that gets consumed and then reconsumed and put back out. Like the storage of that data, how do you keep that in a place that's safe and secure? and allow government people to get to it in the fashion that they need to, et cetera, as this all continues to grow. I think we can all fairly state that it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to grow. I mean, I think you started us off with a statistic that said last year versus 2 years ago, more than basically 100% plus growth in usage. I think we're going to continue to see statistics like that probably over the next few years until it sort of levels out and you get people fully adopted across the entirety of the government space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that statistics that we had for 2024, I mean, that's when we started tracking the numbers. And I think we started tracking the numbers in 2020. I don't remember the exact year, but yeah, it was kind of sporadic. So we don't really know the exact number. Mm-hmm. But yes, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the future. And as AI adoption grows, just like we talked about, how can agencies future-proof their data infrastructure for scalability and evolving threats? What would your advice be?
So I think there's a couple of things that go into the answer to that. I mean, one is infrastructure, certainly. I mean, as they scale and they grow, they're going to have to create an infrastructure that allows data to flow properly and in a quality fashion. Without having the traditional sort of pipe choking, if you will, to kind of use that term. It's an old term around data flow, but they're going to have to be able to get to the information. One of the other things I think that's really critical, and we see as an organization at TD SYNNEX Public Sector and DLT Solutions in combination, is maybe not interagency exchange, but the ability for agencies to sort of migrate or bring data across the agency walls, if you will, right? I mean, they tend to be very siloed. That still goes on a little bit today. I think our government folks are making great strides there, but again, there's still a lot of sort of siloing or firewalling, if you will. So the sharing of data in a secured fashion also becomes very critical. If you think about it from the perspective of, again, mentioned earlier, cybersecurity is everywhere. If we kind of let's maybe use a DOD or a military side of the federal government perspective, we've got people in theater, right? You've got warfighters in combat, et cetera, like the flow of data and the quickness that they get that, and their leaders and the ability to make proper decisions based off of real-time data flowing, that's all built and based off of infrastructure and all the things that sit on top of it. So really important to get that going. And I think the other thing that's really important is, again, provenance around AI and governance, right? I mean, no one has the formal full answer to that. I think people understand and we all collectively know where we would like to see that go, not only as folks that are engaged or people that are engaged with the federal government and the federal government themselves, but as individual human beings, right, in the ecosystem, if you will, of government. It really does need to be morally, strong, and everybody's working towards that. Again, that's not to say that people are disregarding that, but I think again we see on a fairly frequent basis reporting, et cetera, of that's a continuous process, and it probably always will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trey, before I let you go, as we look ahead, what's exciting for you in TD SYNNEX? What are your priorities for 2025?
Sure. So as an organization, TD SYNNEX Public Sector, and again in combination with DLT Solutions, really what we're looking at as far as how we face our government customers is making sure that our government customers have the ability to get to the technology that they need to be successful, not only in their AI missions, but beyond that. And to further that point, and we talked about secure supply chain, et cetera, right? We are very focused on that, making sure that our government customers never have to wonder on where in the supply chain their stuff came from or the products that they're installing came from, that there's anything felonious or fictitious or false in there. So that's a huge thing we're focused on as an organization. We also face our vendors, right? Our software and hardware vendors. We take this very similar stance with them. And the vendor community is very focused on this as well. So I'd like to compliment them around that, and our partner ecosystem also. So really sort of the triangle, if you will, of how we all support our federal government customers is really well on its way to being in place. You talk about future state. I mean, if I could, I'll have a little fun with this today. It's not going anywhere. I think we can all agree to that. And I think all of us are using more AI maybe than perhaps we realize in the course of our day-to-day lives. I mean, there's always the folks that are really hyper-focused on it and they're super excited about bleeding-edge technology, et cetera, and they're always going to be early adopters. But I think more of us are using it than we realize necessarily, and I think we'll continue to progress that. If I may, what I'd like to leave you with today is, it's an exciting technology. I think there may be an element of fear, out in the world at large, and then that comes into play certainly in some very specific aspects. But I don't think it's something that people should be afraid of. I think it's something that they should adopt and they should look forward to using. It's really the next evolution of the information technology toolkit, or toolbox, if you will. Right? If we think about, I don't know what the right number of years are, but the idea of the internet at some point was this very sort of futuristic, almost movie-like scenario. AI, I mean, I'm sure all of us have some favorite movies on our list where there's AI, in the future, and we're like, oh, that's never going to happen in our lifetime. Maybe it's never going to happen, and we're there. We're here today. The other thing I would offer up is if anyone is afraid or fearful that their job's going to be eliminated or they're no longer, required as a human being, I think people should move away from that thought. What we look at as an organization, and Patrick Zammit, who's our CEO, made a statement one time, and he said, AI is not going to replace people. It's where that real mix comes is people who are very comfortable and competent in using AI, they may give people who don't use AI a run for your money. So I would encourage everyone that's hearing this today and to share out into the world. It's not something you should be afraid of. Understand how to use it, and it will become a tool that will make you more efficient and stronger, and not only doing your job, but probably in your life as a whole. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a little space for fear, but at the same time, it's such an exciting time.
It is.
Yeah, Trey, thank you so much. There's plenty more to talk about. We're unfortunately out of time. So let me thank our guest, Trey Bostick, the Senior Director for the Federal Agency Specialist Program at TD SYNNEX Public Sector. Trey, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to join you today.
Of course. I'm Anastasia Obis, and you're watching Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on AI and data exchange.